thinking about that today. I mean, it's going by, but I think the students will attest that what we told them is starting to, the acclimation is starting to take place already. I can see it. It's all starting. Tasha's shaking her head. It's all coming together now.
As I've looked at all the people in my groups, my first group that dropped, and then some of the other people in the class that dropped, I'm just looking at it and going, why?
Right.
Why would you drop this?
Yeah, because
This is great. It's, I don't
yeah,
want to say it's easy because it's a lot of work, but it's easy because I'm doing work that's going to be beneficial to me later.
that's great.
It's hands-on.
Right, and that's what we want it to be. And thank you for that testimony. That's I mean, that's what we want it to be. That is great. That is great.
I know I'm going to have to move, rearrange one Zoom group. I'm down to 3 people in one Zoom group, group 1.
How many are in your other ones, Dr. Revis?
4. I'm down to.
If you've got 3 and they're staying there, just if there's 3, you might want to keep them like that. I mean, that's.
Well, I've got one group that's 5, so I'm gonna move one to the 3 group, and then 3 groups of 4 because I only have students right now.
Yeah.
I so hope we lose no one else.
Me too. So I've got 13 in my group. How many have you got?
12.
12. I think maybe some of it may have to do with people are just so stressed from COVID right now that I think that, some realize that, with everything that I've been dealing with, I just can't deal with one more thing right now. I'm hoping that they'll reconsider and come back maybe in the fall.
I hope so too.
Yeah, because I mean, those of you that have hung in here, this is week 3. You've got it, like Tasha said, you've got a lot behind your belt already. And, I just would think, if I stop now, wow, that's 3 weeks of my life I've wasted, and I'm not going to waste any of my life,
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money. That's the truth. Yes. It's an expensive program, but if you complete it with fidelity, is an excellent program, and it will open doors for you. It's been proven to do that. Well, it's 7 o'clock, and we're going to get started. Let me see how many have. People are a little bit slow signing on, but we're gonna get started anyway, Dr. Revis. We were just talking about. Thank you for thank you for joining in this evening. This is the beginning of week 3, and honestly, it's hard to believe already, like Dr. Revis and I said, that we are in week 3. The time goes by so quickly. And this is found under week 3 in Blackboard for you. This is our agenda for today, and we're going to try our best to stick with this. It's basically a guide for us so that we can make sure that we're covering everything that we need to cover for you. In a minute, we're going to just welcome in comments from both of us, comments about task 1 of the APPSL. And then we're going to do a quick review of task 2 of the APPSL. And then Dr. Revis is going to share a decision-making PowerPoint that is part of the reading that you will have done. And then we're going to just a very quick review of the peer review process. And I think that Dr. Revis, that's probably just comments, because I'm getting, for the most part, I'm getting good work there. And so I think that's just a matter of comments there. And then we do want to introduce you to task 3. We'll not go into we'll go into it in great detail next week, but we do want to go ahead and expose you to it, because I think some of you will be ready for task 3 before the week's over with, based on where you are with things. And I want to show you in Blackboard, just a reminder that, where am I? Here I am. Give me a second, I'll find it. Here I am. Okay, in Blackboard, just remember that you can always find in Blackboard for that week the assignments that are due for that week. And if you notice everything's in red, that means that everything is dealing with the APPSL at this point. And just remember that the APPSL Task 1 revisions are due to Dr. Revis and me for our final grade this week, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. The APPSL Task 1 peer reviews are due to your assignment Dropbox. Your APPSL Task 2 draft is due for discussion board, just like you did Task 1 this past week. And then the last is just a reminder that make sure that you've got your Zoom groups going. Dr. Revis, would you like to begin just talking about the work that you've seen so far with Task 1 of the APPSL?
I would love to. I just want to say, first of all, Dr. Stedman, my students had their assignment in early. I think the latest assignment came in on Sunday evening, about maybe afternoon, 5 o'clock.
Mine was about between 5 and 5:30, and
kudos.
I had everything.
Kudos to you guys, and I was able to get through and give you feedback. Finished most of them Sunday evening. And I will tell you this, I was very pleased with your content. Your content was right on point. Now, I was pretty tough on APA. Some of you, the most frequent things that I would say you need to go back and check would be your in-text and parenthetical citations, and your reference, how to cite your references correctly in the reference section. So one of the things that I would suggest doing is going back to week 2 in our coaching class, where Dr. Hamilton did that great PowerPoint on APA format. I would go back and review that if you're struggling with it, or if I made those comments on your paper and you don't quite understand. She went over the most frequent types of formatting. So go back there. Now, you notice that I don't say things correct the APA for you, because guys, you can look it up just like I can. I don't have it memorized. I can look at it pretty well and tell if it's wrong, but I don't have it memorized. And the only way you're going to learn it is when you go look it up and dig it up. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, other than, I'm going to be pretty tough on it right here at the beginning, because it will force you, I think, to learn. You need to know how to do in-text citations and parenthetical citations, and how to correctly do your references, and of course any kinds of figures and those kinds of things. Those are the most commonly used things that we do in APA. So I was very pleased overall. Now, just to make sure everybody's clear, when you do your revisions, you submit it back in the discussion board where you did your first draft to us. That way we can score it and evaluate it and revise your score there. And hopefully you can get 100 there, and then we'll tell you to submit it to your Dropbox, and then you'll get another 100 there. If you don't resubmit it through your discussion board for the instructor and peer review, then we don't change that grade. It is what it is. So just be sure you go back through that review process, and if it's good to go, you're going to get 100 there, and then you're going to get 100 there on your Dropbox. So I was very pleased with content, Dr. Stedman.
I was too. And again, just a reminder with APA, it's going to be so important that you adhere to the 7th edition of APA. Just some little things that I picked up on is make sure that you know what APA says about when is it a number and when is it the word. Remember, 1 through 9 is the word, and then 10 above you use the number. You never begin a sentence with a number or a number percentage. So those are the little things like that. words that need to be hyphenated, apostrophes. Look at your spacing. Go back and look at your spacing to make sure that, remember, this is going to be a final submission of this is going to be submitted so that it goes to DPI for your certification. So some other eyes are going to look at it besides us. And then after Dr. Revis and me, remember that a final evaluator is going to look at this. So we're going to tell you everything that we possibly can, in addition to your peer reviews, that will hopefully get you to an accomplished state. We can't determine that. All we can do is guide you in that direction. However, we will never let you go forward if it's not at least at a proficient state. Proficiency means that you've passed, but accomplished means that you have really knocked it out of the ballpark. And your goal should always be that I've done everything that I possibly humanly can to make sure that it's that it's accomplished work. So that's what you should always strive for. I want us to take just a quick review of task 2, and I'm going to go in several different places with that. I've got the helpful hints document drawn up. However, I need to remind you that this is the helpful hints document, as we indicated last week, is a guide. You must follow the template. Use the template and fill in the blanks. And I'm going to go to the template in just a moment, but I wanted to just review, task 2, prompts 1 and 2. Now, in task 1, the main thing was that you were becoming familiar with, what is a good PLC? What does it look like? You formed your, what does the research say? And we said you had to have at least 1 to 4 reference. In addition to that, remember we talked about, you formed your committee, and you talked about who your committee, why you chose the people that you did, what were their credentials, et cetera, et cetera. Then you said what is a meeting going to look like? The norms. How often are you going to meet? When you meet, who's going to do what? How is it going to be done? And those documents can be found in Blackboard under the APPSL template and materials section. Lots of resources are there, for establishing norms, for references. A lot of stuff was there for you to use. Now we're at task 2. All the dust is settled. You got your group together, and you've gotten permission to conduct your PLC, and you kind of know what direction you want to go in already. You've got that in your mind. You've thought about it. Your principal your cited supervisor has probably discussed it with you, but you have a pretty good idea what direction you want to go in. However, you can't just go there without doing some other work before you get to that place, because once you do what you have to do in task 2, once you get to the end of the road, you may decide, well, what I thought is not really where I need to go. Sometimes that happens. So that's where you are. Just remember, the headings stay just like you see, are data collection strategies. That is your heading. And underneath the data collection strategy, that's what you're doing. You're collecting, or you're gathering strategies or for the different forms of data that you're going to use in the research as you decide what is my most pressing need in the end. You will work with the selected PLC team formed in task 1 to determine the strategies that will be used to collect this data to determine the most pressing need for improving student achievement. Your narrative work for this section is simply going to discuss those strategies. And I thought about this. Just think about this. Think of it in medical terms. We know that there's a problem out there. You go to the doctor knows that there is the doctor's going to have to do surgery. Dr. F he's got to do surgery. He's just not going to say, okay, Amanda, you show up in my office tomorrow and I'm going to you. What he's going to do, the doctor is going to, he's going to think about the problem. He's going to think about the problem, and the doctor is going to begin pulling together resources, the data. He's going to look at all of your records. He's going to look at your medical history. He's going to, you know, all the tests that have been run. He's going to think of, he's going to begin putting a strategy in place, a strategy with him and his medical team about how he's going to begin working towards identifying exactly what the problem is. Then you go to number 2, criteria and process for identifying the most pressing need. Once the team and you have determined the strategies for collecting data, you're going to decide what criteria and process is going to be used for identifying the most pressing need. Now, you've got all these strategies in place. You've talked about all these strategies. You've got them in place. Now, what are you going to do with it? You've got to begin putting some order to it. You know, decide, and when you do that, you may decide, well, you know, you may use it all, but then you may say, you know, I really don't need this, but we can really use this. So you just begin, you just begin deciding, you know, what I can use, what I can't use. Then finally, the team comes together and you analyze the data. Now, in medical terms, remember, when the doctor and the team comes together, they look at all of the stuff that they have decided that they're going to use. And the reason they're looking at that is because they're going to decide what's the best procedures we can put in place if I've got to do surgery on Amanda. You know, what's the best procedures that I can put in place? I would imagine that the doctor, based on their knowledge and skills, is going to go back and look at research, you know, successful surgeons that have done, you know, surgery in those areas before, to find out, you know what they've in medical terms, what they've done. But anyway, you're going to decide. You're gonna sit down. It's like having the pieces of the puzzle on the table, and you've got to put the pieces together so that they make sense. And that's what you're doing at this point. You're just putting, you're taking all the data, you're analyzing it to make sense. Now, and I can see Amanda and Tasha, that's why I keep calling their names. Amanda may look at it and she may say, well, you know, team, this is what I see. When I look at this piece of data, this is what I see. But then Tasha may say, well, now look at this. And Amanda may say, well, you know, Tasha, I hadn't even seen that. And you know, wow, that does make sense. So when the team gets together and you begin having that dialogue, each person brings something to the table that maybe the other person hadn't even thought about. But anyway, as you're collaborating, as you're looking at everything, you're coming to a consensus. You start out broad, but then you begin to narrow it, because you've got to come to a point. And when you get to that point, the team finally makes a decision based on our analysis of this data. You know, and that's test scores, that's benchmark data, that's, you know, anything that you can pull in to look at. When you get, you know, you come to a point and you say, you know, based on what we see, you know, wow, this appears to be the most pressing need at this moment, based on what we see. And as a group, as a team, that is a collaborative decision. The team makes the decision based on the analysis of the data. Now, once you do all that, you're going to put a plan together, and you're going to present this. You've got to write all this up, just like it happens. And then you're going to put this together, and you're going to present these findings to your administration. Now, you may not be doing face-to-face right now. You may have to set up a Zoom session, but it's your responsibility to say, you know, this is what we have done. You go through it step by step with your administration. And as a result of it, this is what we have found. We have identified this as our most pressing need. Now, guess what? Your principal may say then, you know, wow, that is wonderful work. I really appreciate it. Move forward with, in your PLC, move forward with finding ways that we can try to fix the problem. You know, what can we do to fix the problem? Yes, you have my blessings. But then, Dr. Ravis, what might that principal say when you say the most pressing need is this? What might that principal say to them? You pick up from here.
Well, the principal could say that's all well and good, but we are in February and we're not going to change directions right now with what we have decided to work on this year. Or we are going to hold tight with what we're going to work on and we'll look at it again in the summer. So, you know, that's okay. If they decide they're not going to implement anything you find out, that's okay. It's about you learning the process, and it's about you leading and guiding your team, your PLC team, through the process. Now, guys, in task 1, you make sure that it's clear in the way you're writing it that you are leading and facilitating the PLC through this discussion and through this data analysis and data dive. You could do it yourself, sure. Should you have some things prepared? Of course. But you do not make that decision. You facilitate your team coming up with the most pressing need and with analyzing the data.
And it's okay when you come with your team to say, you know, some things, some work that you may have done in advance of the meeting to say, you know, this is what I've already found. It's okay because you're a part of the team. You're leading the team, but you're a part of the team. So sometimes that's necessary to get the discussion started in the right direction. And Dr. Revis, would you just talk about what they've got to do in prompt 2 of task 2?
Sure. The easiest way that I kind of keep the 2 prompts separate in my mind, in prompt 1, you're narratively describing what you're doing. You're going through all the steps that your PLC and you have taken. In prompt 2, I think it's more or less all the graphic work, the graphic representation of the work that you have looked at and the data that you have examined. Now, be careful. Don't just put a figure out there with no explanation. Remember, you can write explanations under your figures, or you can introduce a figure with a little bit of text so we know what we're looking at. But this is all about the figures and the tables and charts and graphs that you have looked at and that you are going to use with, or that your PLC did look at and is using.
And you know what? Just and again, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. You may have decided your most pressing need is it could be school-wide literacy. If you're a middle school, it could be school-wide literacy, and you could literally address grades 6, 7, and 8. However, you could say that in looking at the reading test scores, you could say that the subgroup that is really bringing our test scores down is our 7th grade. It could be all females, or it could be white females. It could be in 8th grade, it could be African American males. You can look at subgroups, and your focus can be on a subgroup, and your PLC could be, my most pressing need is to help the subgroup grow, to find improvement, because if you can get the subgroup to grow, then you can improve the overall student achievement and test scores in your school. So, you know, you don't have to do anything school-wide. It can be a small group that you're working with, a subgroup that is tested. Now, when you look at the test data, And we know that there was not anything from last year, so you would go to the previous year. And you decide, okay, that literacy, school-wide literacy is a problem, or literacy in grade 3 is a problem if you're in a K-5 school. And you can say, okay, we know that third grade is a tested grade area, so we're going to work with, we're going to develop a PLC so that we're working nothing but with improving literacy in third grade. Well, to get your graphic information, you can go to the results, the end of grade test results, and you can pull it has all of that information embedded in the test results. You can pull the graphs for grade 3, and you can show all that. This is what it looks like in my school. This is what it looks like my school compared to other schools in my district. Or this is what it looks like in my school. This is what it looks like other schools in my district. But then this is what it looks like in comparison to the state, with other third grades. That's in there. All you've got to do is to copy and paste those and put them as, as figures into task 2 with an explanation of what it is. So if those graphics are already out there, you can use them. However, you can also, based on your research, you can design your own. And there's programs in Microsoft Word that will help you design those graphs and charts if you decide to do that. Before we go any further, are there any questions of Dr. Revis and me about what you need to do this week for task 2?
I have a question. It's Jenna Wells.
Okay.
So I work myself with a virtual program, and I am partnering with the middle college in my district, who had their juniors all participate in virtual learning this year. And then this upcoming semester, some of them are continuing in virtual learning, and then some of them will be transitioning back to school. And we are focusing on that specific set of students, those virtual students. But like, we don't have a whole lot of data from them because they joined the school in 11th grade. It's only 11th and 12th grade. So we don't have a lot of historical data from these students. Now, we do have a few who took EOCs in the fall, and then we have some who will be taking them in the spring.
But use what you got. Where did they come from before 11th grade?
Schools all over the district.
And so there's, go ahead, Dr. Revis.
I was going where you were going. Just get their latest historical data. You should be pretty easy to pull up. You're going to have to go student by student to get that. I don't know that there's.
Yeah, I don't know that you would have time. But what you need to do, use what you've got, but then just what you told Dr. Revis and me, you say that in your narrative work. You just simply write that, who they are, where they're coming from, that the data is limited, and this is what we have, and you start from where you are. You've got to start somewhere with them. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. I just we have an idea in mind, and we're thinking about that transition and helping them transition into their college classes for next year, transition back into the school. So we wanted to look at some of the available data for how they performed in virtual, and then I guess use our PLC. Ours is planned for Friday morning.
Right.
Use our PLC to kind of identify everybody's bringing their data to the team, because it's a blending of 2 programs basically.
Right. And I think it's a golden opportunity to really do some good things. So, but just remember that whatever any of you decide to do, that you must be able to measure it in the end with some type of test. It can't be, if you can't measure it with some type of test, then you don't need to use it. Dr. Revis, did I say that right?
Correct. And your reviewers are very, very accustomed to seeing you perform a data analysis on your state testing data. So I would try my best to get the latest state testing data, but also I will say as well as that I think reviewers are very accustomed to dealing with candidates who are in an alternative program. And so they know sometimes that historical data is pretty difficult to come up with. So be sure you lay that out for them. And one last thing, Dr. Stedman, they need to have a presentation with your administration. Now, guys, this is a lot to put into 1 week. You've got to do your PLC, and then you've got to turn around and make a presentation to your admin team. If your administrator is on your PLC, then I think you're okay there. You still need to talk about that our administrator was on the PLC team, but
Now, Dr. Evans, now one of the things you may find, just like let's say, for instance, it's just like, and I can't, Miss Wells, I can't remember your first name, but you're going to do your PLC on Friday. Well, that doesn't give you time to present to your administration yet. That's okay. You submit to Dr. Revis and me everything that you have, on Sunday night for task 2, with the explanation that you will be presenting to your administration on Monday or Tuesday of the next week. And then when you will resubmit it with that for our review before we tell you that it's ready for we realize that when you have to present to administration, that sometimes that there will be a first submission and then you'll have to send it back with the final work. We understand that. However, when it comes to us on Sunday night, it should have everything completed except for possibly the presentation. Some of you may be able to work all that in there. And then if your administration is on your PLC, if they're part of it, then they're helping with the decision that you need to say that in your narrative work, that my principal is a part of the PLC, and therefore it was all presented during the time that I was working with my professional learning community.
Okay, and she is on the PLC and
Yeah.
bringing in data as well.
Yeah. So if they're there, that means you don't have to do the extra presentation because they're already there anyway. But you need to make sure that that is clearly indicated in your narrative work for Dr. Revis and me, and especially for your final evaluation when it goes to the evaluator, because they're going to look for that.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. We're gonna open up for some more questions at the end. Before we go any further, this aligns itself with what you're doing right now. You're at the decision-making process time, and that was part of your reading. Dr. Revis is going to share. Let me pull it up, Dr. Revis.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. There we go.
Okay, so this came from your text up in chapter 3, which you had for reading last week, and we didn't talk about it last week. So we'll talk about it this week because, guys, as you might be aware and as you might can guess, being an administrator, you're making all kinds of decisions. Well, guess what? You do that in your current job. You make hundreds of decisions a day. Many of them are decisions that you don't even think about making because they're so second nature to you. But we're going to talk a little bit about decision making and in that leadership role as a school leader. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the case study that's found on page 43. I love this case study. And let me just go over the case study with you. This is about a new superintendent who had been on board a couple months, and he was sitting in his office one day when a bus driver came in and said, "Hi, Chief." First of all, when somebody calls you boss or chief, my antenna always went up. But anyway, comes in and says, "We've got a problem on bus route 5 that I drive. And he went on to explain that the way the route was directed, he was getting his children to school late, and the teachers were complaining because he was getting caught by a train at a certain railroad crossing. But he tells the superintendent, if I just reverse my route, I miss the train, I'm free and clear, I get my children to school on time. So the superintendent, wanting to be a problem solver, and guys, we are problem solvers. That's what we do as educators. We want to solve problems. He very quickly said, okay, Mickey, sounds good. Inform your parents, and let's take a go at it. Well, it wasn't good, because first and foremost, even though this was a small school system, the superintendent neglected to even consult or have Mickey consult. There was a transportation director who was in charge of designing the bus routes and had to approve all bus route changes and everything. So it really wasn't the superintendent's problem in the first place to take care of. And secondly, had he investigated the facts and asked around, he would have found out there was no morning train. And thirdly, he would have figured out that children had longer bus rides. When you reverse that route, children who were picked up first in the morning were dropped off last in the afternoon. And most critically, the safety issue was children had to cross the road to get on the bus in the morning. So, classic example of he did not do his homework. He did not consider the information. He did not talk to people who were affected by the decision and consider all the options and consider the feasibility and practicality of it. So it became a big mess right then and there for the transportation director then to have to clean up, and the superintendent, I suppose, jumped in there. But guys, people are going to want you to make decisions at the drop of a hat. And I always just will encourage you, there are some decisions that are pretty easy to be made, but don't make people rush you in that decision-making process. It is much better to slow down, gather your information, and consult with individuals or bring groups together to talk about the decisions. Don't let anyone force you into making a decision. That doesn't make you indecisive at all. Now, if you never make a decision, then yeah, that is an issue. But don't make people rush you into that. So on the next slide, just a few things you think about when you make a decision. You can go on to the next slide, Dr. Stedman. Okay. You don't live on an island by yourself, and you're an individual. And of course, you've got your own values and virtues. And so don't forget, you're always going to rely back on your ethics, your justice, and you need to be authentic and genuine when you start making decisions. And remember that we do no harm by our decisions. We don't want any children to suffer because of our decisions. And some decisions are very difficult to make. And the more difficult decisions, the more people typically you want to get involved in that process. And so the next slide, there are a couple models of decision making that I think your textbook does a really good job in going into. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into it in depth. Here are some graphic organizers that really help, I think, for you to think about the models. This particular one is about, the level of acceptance that has to happen in your organization of the decision, and the importance of the decision as it in respect to the overall organizational goals. When you have something that has high acceptance requirements and it's very important to your overall organizational goals, then those are the decisions that you really need to focus on and take your time with and pull groups of people in. And then the next one gives me a headache just to look at. but you know what? If you read through this tree and read down through here, it's talking about possible executive actions depending upon some question stems that you ask yourself through this process. And it goes all the way from being a very autocratic, I'm making the decision my own, an A1, to I'm going to pull together a group and I'm going to give the group the authority and ability to come to a consensus to make a decision. Now, on the next slide, I'll just say, the only thing that I will tell you is it is good to get groups together and to be included in the decision-making process. I'm so sorry. I'm the only person I think exists that has a landline. But if you do bring groups of people together, you know, tell them right off the bat, now guys, I'm bringing you together just purely as an advisory group. I'm going to make the final decision. The likelihood of people really wanting to give their time to come together and give you their input, it will dwindle down. So remember, a team has collective wisdom. You just go into it and make sure the ground rules are laid out. If you're going to take it in an advisory capacity, fine, tell them that up front. Or if you're going to allow them to make the decision, then put what kind of parameters on that decision and make sure they have some parameters. I would never sit a team down and not give them any kind of parameters or any kind of opinion about what I would like to see as an outcome. And you've got a case study. I think your first case study, I can't remember first or second, deals with something very close to this. So just a graphic organizer on the last slide that gives you an overview of the decision-making process. And I would just say to you, always, always, always think about, is it my problem or is there somebody else in the building that I have assigned that responsibility to? If you have assistant principals, one of the biggest ways you can get a disheartened employee is for you to take away their power and their decision making in an area that you've assigned to them to do. So, you know, don't overstep your bounds. There's nothing saying that you don't consult with them or want them to report to you, but just don't take away their power and empower them to do what you've asked them to do. And always
Dr. Revis.
Yes.
I'm sorry. One of the things to remember too, remember the first night we told you to make sure you take off that teacher hat and you put on your principal hat. Right now in the decision-making process, you're going to have to make hard decisions many times now, even as leading in these PLCs, because you are being required to think not as a teacher, but as an administrator.
That's right. But don't ever forget the perspective of teachers. You know,
Right.
give their input.
They're important.
They're important.
Very important.
And don't forget what it's like to be a teacher. And so when you're making those big decisions that affect a whole lot of people, get their input. Don't leave.
Revis, when they go into the next evidence you do, the APPSL focuses on teacher leadership and teacher empowerment. So you'll see how all of this begins to come together. You know, as the leader of the school, you've got to draw a fine line. You know, how far do I let somebody go? But you can't always just make all the decisions yourself. You've got to empower other people to help be a part of that decision-making process.
And one of the things I will tell you in addition to that, there are people that will very quickly want you to make their decisions for them.
Amen.
You know, they would like to come into your office and drop that monkey and put it on your back. And I had a superintendent that I worked with for several years, and he would say, don't do that. Don't take on their troubles, their issues, their worries, their indecisiveness. You know, sure, be there and talk them through it and ask a lot of good questions, but you want to build in your staff their own empowerment and their own confidence to make decisions that impact their classroom. So, you know, it'd be easy for you to answer all the questions and be the only decision maker in your school, but you don't want that. It'll wear you out and wear you down. You want to You want to empower people and grow people in that process.
Dr. Revis, while I'm pulling up a document, talk briefly about what you've seen so far in the peer review process, and then I'll
Okay.
give comments as well.
Yes, I've already looked at some of your peer reviews, and I will say that for the most part, you guys have been very thorough, very formative, and very specific in your feedback. If you weren't, I let you know that, and your grade is reflected in that, so that you know that you need to go a little bit deeper or be a little more specific. The one thing I need to remind you of, you put the feedback for your peer back in that discussion board thread, but don't forget to put it back in the peer review Dropbox so your instructors can view it that way and give you a grade. I can see it in the peer review Dropbox or the discussion board, but I can't grade you there. I have to give your grade only if it's in that Dropbox. Okay?
And Dr. Revis, I was pretty, I guess I was more lenient, knowing that this was your first time. I gave everybody that has submitted work so far, I've given you a good grade, but I've given you some comments that I expect to see. If I said something, then that means that the next time when you submit one, I expect to see it to be more detailed, more in-depth, to do this. And my grading will not be as lenient because I've given you some directions to move in a certain direction, and that's what I'll be looking for. For example, if you tell somebody that that there's something wrong with, you need to check your APA, then say what you've seen wrong with APA. Now, you'll find a lot of times Dr. Revis and I may even say, for example, just like with your in-text references, if there's a problem there and it's a comma, a lot of times it's a comma or a period problem, where you don't have them. We may say, for example, and we'll say, this is what you've got, but this is what it should look like. Sometimes we do that initially. We don't always, because with as much work as we don't have time to be that specific with everything, but sometimes we'll do that. Or if you see, if when I spoke earlier, if it should have been written as a word and you wrote it as a number, I might say, for example, check your APA for writing numbers, and I might say, for example, the number 9 should be the word 9, something like that. So if you see a problem, when you need to always provide an example of what you're talking about, or else, it really has not given them much feedback if you just say, check APA. Well, that's the whole thing. That's their whole document. What is specifically wrong with APA that you see? So that, let your feedback be a little more detailed and a little more critical if it needs to be, but that's still positive feedback. But anyway, remember the first night that we shared with you, and this is found in your Blackboard shell, is anyway, what it means to have proficient work versus accomplished work. And remember, I went over this. I said to be accomplished for task 1, you had to do this, and you had to do this, and you had to do this, and you had to do this. Make sure that you have done that. And I did note, Dr. Revis, that in several of the peer reviews, they reminded the candidate to make sure that they had used basic technologies to communicate with other members of the PLC. You know why? Your evaluator is going to look to see that that has been done. Okay? So this is what, if you've got, if one of these areas is missing, they're probably going to automatically move back to proficiency at least. Wouldn't you think so, Dr. Revis?
Right. And when I used to score and evaluate, if I didn't see the technologies that you're using to communicate, you automatically got 3 because that's the only thing that's different or in addition to. So be sure and look at those rubrics because we want everyone to shoot for that accomplished.
Let's look at task 2, what we've already gone over. What do I have to do to get an accomplished? And again, this is in your Blackboard. You must describe data collection strategies and criteria in the process of identifying the most pressing academic need. That's what they're going to look for first. In addition to that, and data is graphically represented in the narrative in the forms of charts, tables, graphs, etc., to be used to illustrate and support the data analysis and conclusion from up here. And the candidate will provide evidence that she or he can effectively lead. That's what Dr. Revis said. That you can you've got to show that you're the leader, that you can effectively lead a collaborative PLC meeting where data is analyzed and discussed, concluding with the identification of a specific need or needs. That is going to be looked at very strongly there. And then finally, the evidence demonstrates academic needs assessment and strong PLC leadership that exceeds a proficiency rating. They're going to look at, you can say, well, I did this. Well, you can pass a test. I remember when I was in high school, 70 was a passing score. That means I got a passing grade. But that wasn't going to get me an accomplished grade. It would put me over here somewhere. So when we look at this and when your evaluator looks at it, they're going to look at it that you haven't just skimmed the surface of things, that you have detailed the information that's needed in it. And there's no ambiguity anywhere. There's no question marks on their part or on our part when we look at it. You've got it all clearly laid out. Dr. Revis, any comments there?
Right, and this is the very rubric that your evaluator is going to use when they look at your work and task stream. I would go back and just reemphasize one more time. When I was evaluating, I always made sure that the candidate disaggregated data down by subgroups. So that, for me, was kind of the delineating factor between a proficient and an accomplished, that you really delve very deeply into data down to subgroups. So don't forget to do that.
Okay. And then the last thing we want to just introduce tonight is, let me pull it up, is template and material. Here it is. We just want to introduce to you tonight, before we open it up for any final questions, we want to introduce what task 3 is going to look like. Dr. Revis, would you like to just begin by talking about this? I know next week you're going to mention the annotated bibliography, but I think you actually go into that in more detail next week.
Yeah, I'll go into that in more detail. Well, first and foremost, this task, it requires a lot of narrative work on your part, a lot of research and narrative work. So you're going to do a lot of this on your own time, not in front of a PLC as far as your research. But the first thing you have to do is, in prompt 1, is create an annotated bibliography. And we'll talk about what that looks like. But once you have identified your need, let's say it's 3rd grade reading comprehension, then you're going to pull and go into your Bulldog One search and look for resources for 5 regular resources and a minimum of 3 online resources about that need. So the online resources are things like Study Island, Plato Accelerated Reader. There are many others out there now that you have seen or that you're going to explore through your research. And then you're going to do, so you're going to
Dr. Reyes, before you go any
Yes.
further, just remember, everything you do in task 3 is an arrow pointing right back to your identified problem. Everything from this point on is going to be an arrow pointing directly back to that identified problem at the end of task 2.
If you identify reading comprehension at grade 3 as your issue, then everything you do in this task should be about reading comprehension. You're going to identify possible in that first prompt, you're going to identify possible solutions, and then in part B, you're going to do a little mini research section about best practices. Okay, so it's what are my best practices, and those are 3 references. And then what are possible solutions? That's your annotated bibliography. And again, we're going to go all into that. But you're going to do task 1, or prompt 1, excuse me. That's you. You're doing that and pulling that research and writing that up all by yourself. You're going
You'll
to
share it with your team, but they won't be
Yes.
doing any of that work.
That's you.
You may ask them for, do you know of any online resources or programs out there? Can you recommend anything? You may ask them, but it's mainly, this is your research.
Correct. Okay, and prompt 2, you want to do that one, Dr. Stedman, or you want me?
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Go
And
ahead.
continue. Well, either way, task 3, prompt 2. Please note that in the prompt directives that the candidate is responsible for detailing how the PLC created and used multiple graphic organizers and visuals such as charts, graphs, tables, timelines, etc. Again, it goes back to just like we did in task 2. You write about it in prompt 1. You're going to show it in prompt 2. Now let's just say that let's go back up to the top just a minute. And again, we're going to go into this in great detail next week. But let's just say, for instance, that your online resource, a program that you use, let's say it's Study Island. And a lot of the schools have Study Island. It's been around a long, long time. Well, Study Island actually, when you put a student in there, Study Island will give you report information on every child. Individual report information. You can get data from Study Island on each child that you can use as well. But let's just say with your once you've identified you've done all of your annotated bibliography, you've done your research, then you've decided, well, I think that this might be a resource, or this might be an online or a research evidence-based program that might help me with this problem. Because Study Island is research and evidence-based, Edmentum is research and evidence-based, Plato is research and evidence-based. So what you're going to do is probably up there in your 3 online, you're going to find something that you really like. Now, you've got to make sure that it's cost effective for your school. You can't find $1 million program and present it to your principal and say, wow, I want this $1 million program to help with literacy at my school, unless you're a rich school. You've got to find something that even if it costs money, that it's something that they possibly could put in a Title I budget, or somewhere that would be reasonable to consider and look at in the planning. But what you're going to do, once you identify that online resource or whatever resource you use, you're going to break it apart, and you're going to do some further research, and you're going to find some graphic information about these things. You're going to show me some things. You're going to show me if it's valid and it's reliable and it's been research based, then guess what? When you do your review of that and when you go into to looking at that program or whatever, there's going to be some information in there that's going to allow you to pull out some graphic information in there that's not, you're going to tell me about it up here, but you're going to show me, you don't have to tell about every one of those programs. You're going to focus on a program or a couple of areas down here that you really think might help you with your identified problem in task 2. But again, you're talking about it in prompt 1. You're going to show us something down here. So again, if you're talking about a specific program or resource up here that you really like, that you really want to focus on, and you think that it might be something that could help with your problem, then you're going to break it down here in prompt 2, and you're going to show us some stuff about it. Dr. Revis, anything else that you want to say about that?
Well, just trying to back up and look at the big picture. In task 2, you're identifying, you're doing your data dive and you're identifying your biggest need. In task 3, you're doing research to find possible solutions to address that need. And that's all it is. Now, it's a lot of research and a lot of reading. And that's something that sometimes we don't always do as educators. We would rather take word of mouth from another school across the district who has been successful in reading comprehension in 3rd grade. We would rather take their word of mouth about it rather than do our own research. But you've got to know how to research all these programs and all these strategies.
I want to just show you something in conclusion of this. This was one of our students from last semester, Dr. Revis.
Okay.
I pulled her completed work. In fact, I don't mind. I put your name here, but it was Meredith Eiler. Meredith had just excellent work. But again, I want you to look at, I'm going to just pull down. This is her task 1. Again, that was how it's laid out. But I want to get to task 2 especially, and I want to show you some things here, what Meredith did. Okay, this is task 2. This is her problem has been identified. She's talked about her strategies. She's taught after reviewing the school data with my principal, Dr. Rosenbaum, it was recommended that I research the demographic area of our English learners at William A. Huff. And as a professional, she talked about, even the communication with her principal there. As the PLC team leader, I scheduled a meeting with the team members to examine the school report card. She talked about what she did. The next step was to dig deeper into the data of the why the English language progress at Huff was lower than the entire Charlotte-Mecklenburg school district. And then the final step of data collection, the team and I discussed the importance of examining the access test closely. You see how she step by step broke it down. Then look at there, criteria and process for identifying the most pressing need. The EL department head at blah, 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 the rest of the PLC team and I all reviewed the Navigator platform, specifically reviewing EL students who are long-term, who of those students are high risk, and then their access test scores. She further talked about the process for identifying the most pressing need. And she just continued to go through that process. Then her collaborative data analysis. The collected data was gathered and analyzed in the next meeting held on September 10th by the PLC team and myself. It was clear in the data analysis procedure that the PLC team and I have pressing needs in reading comprehension and literature within the EL program. This is evident, and she went on to talk further and further about that. She showed some percentage information to support everything that she was talking about there. Then her most pressing need. The meeting concluded with me urging the PLC members to give much thought to how the team will address the greatest need. And she just went on talking about that. And you really need to say specifically in there, in conclusion, the most pressing need identified by the team is right here. It was agreed upon that the most pressing need is to close the gap on EL progress at this school when compared to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. Very clear data. Prompt 2, that's where the PLC team and I arrived at the most pressing need through data analysis presented and examined in the following order. She just went on and this is where she provided her own graphic information there. She embedded her own charts and things. She pulled this together herself. She didn't go anywhere and find this, Dr. Revis. She did this based on her data dig and data dive.
And notice that she just doesn't stick figures there consecutively one after the other.
Right.
There's some narrative that describes what she's trying to reveal or portray in those figures.
Look at there. In the final analysis, that's the same thing as saying almost in conclusion. In the final analysis, the PLC team and I had a collaborative discussion about how long-term EL students identify as being in the program for over 5 years. Anyway, that's how she concluded. Now I want to come down here, one last thing, and then we'll show this next week, Dr. Revis, with the annotated bibliography when we talk about it. I'm going to just use Meredith as a guide from this point on. I can't give it to them, but I can just show them parts of it. You already have an example, but Meredith was much more detailed with some of the things that I wanted to show in there. Okay, let me get down to the end. Now this was her final work. So this is her running reference section and her running here, let me see. I'm coming on down. Okay, her reference section. Now, I had some issues with a few people with the reference section. I want you to look at Meredith's reference section. Notice it's double spaced after each entry. Now, if there's only one line in this entry, so she double spaced after it. But let's say that there is 2 lines in the next entry. You double space it, but notice everything begins a line to the left, then you indent the next line, and you indent all following lines, and they are aligned underneath each other until you finish with that reference, and then you double space and you go to your next entry. You follow the same thing. Some were making this harder than you should have. This example is also in the example in your APPSL template. Helpful hints, where helpful hints document is, the materials section. It's located in there. Your example is in there. You can go to that reference section and you'll see the correct way that this should be done. And she had a running appendices as well. With that, this is just showing at the end. So I wanted to share that with you so that you would get an example, a good example of what those figures and those the charts and figures that they should look like. Okay. Dr. Revis and I are all ears now, so we are ready. If there's any questions at this point, we're here to help you with whatever we need to help you with. You can unmute and you can start asking.
I have a question about the appendices.
Okay.
So in my submission this time, I've got my slideshow, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 slides. Do those need to be separate appendices, or can that be all one?
That's
just one.
It can be just one. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's
Thank
a good
you.
question.
I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, that's a good question. Other questions? Angela?
I have a question, yes. The PLC that we're doing this week with our group, does that have to be recorded, or will pictures work?
Pictures will work.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, with your presentation to your principal, if let's just say you do a PowerPoint presentation to go over what task, the results of task 2, then whenever you do that, you can provide us with just the PowerPoint presentation and actually print out, if there's 5 frames to it, just show those 5 frames in the appendices section and explain what they represent.
Okay.
And that's for everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question, Angela.
But may I say something along with
Sure.
that? You need to reference somewhere in your narrative that those can be found in the appendices, because this is all going to be put together. And when an evaluator looks at it, they want to be able to read in the narrative work that I presented to my administrative team. The presentation can be found in Appendix D. You need to reference that so they know that you've done that, and they're not having to flip all the way back to that through that appendices to find that, to see if you've done that there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and remember, you can put a link if you do a recording. Put the link there, but know that they're not going to open that link up. Now, Dr. Revis and I may open it up and look at it, and when it goes to DPI, somebody there may open it up and look at it, when it goes there. But you need to show something when the evaluator is there, show evidence that you've presented to your administration, and you need to clearly state, that you presented to your administration on blah, blah, and just say a little bit about what that presentation looked like. Okay. Okay, I think there was a chat. Let me see. When do the Zoom peer review meetings occur? Travis, we're going to talk about that on Thursday night. I'm going to talk about the first one on Thursday night during. You've got a little bit of time, but I'll lay that out on Thursday night, and then Dr. Revis and I will bring it back to you as a team next week as well. Can we record our presentation and send it to our administration team? No, you can send it, but you've got to talk to them. You've got to actually communicate as the leader. You've got to communicate with your administration.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is Stephanie. So you indicated that when we find this most pressing need, we do need to be able to gauge whether what we come up with changes the data or improves the data, improves the need at some point with a test of some sort or an assessment of some sort. At what point in this process, in our semester, will that take place? Because I think a lot of things that we do, we want to have a good time frame to know whether that's worked or not, if that makes sense.
You're not going to be able to necessarily test it. You have to be able to test it. It may be, you can put an action plan in place. You'll present the final action plan to your administration. This won't be the only presentation task too. You'll have to present the action plan as well. And your administration may say, we don't have time to do that this year, but I want you to put this on the back table, because when school starts back in the fall, we are going to implement this.
Okay.
So they may say, yes, we've got time to do something between now and the end of the year. But, based on everything that's happening, it's not likely that you will always be able to get a whole lot done between now and then. And if it's okay, you are learning the process, you're presenting valid, reliable information that your administration can use to move your school from point A to point B, hopefully. And if they choose to use it now, that's okay. That's what we say, hoorah. But if they don't choose to use it, then that's okay too. You will have met the requirements and the learning process for this course.
Okay, that makes
Does
me
that
feel
help?
better.
Okay.
It does. It
Okay.
does.
Okay.
I just was, okay. Thank you.
Along what
welcome.
Stephanie was asking, would like the grade for the end of the course be acceptable? like a grade a student earns. Like us, I think we're going to be looking at data to help support students transition. And would we be able to measure that by saying as it was successful because they were able to successfully complete the course or successfully pass the course?
We won't be looking for that. We will be looking for you to get it to that place. That will be something that will be left for your school. That will be something that you and your school will look at after this class is over with.
Well, they kind of have to look at that when they're putting their action. They have to define how, in their action plan, they have to define their success criteria.
Okay, I misunderstood what
Yeah.
she was asking me there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Revis. I misunderstood.
But
Go ahead.
guys, we're trying to put you through a simulation of what you would do as a principal. And typically these kinds of things that we're asking you to do right now would typically be done in the summer leading up to school starting or early August when you're just pulling members of your school improvement team together. So we understand the timing's not right. Plus you throw COVID in on top of that. They're probably not going to be able to take and do much with your recommendations right now. But it's the process that you are learning that's so valuable.
And that goes back to, and I'm glad you said that, Dr. Evans. Now I understand what you were asking me. When you do your action plan in task 4, then you're going to put actually timelines in there. The timeline may be for this year, but you may decide because of the time, it may be next fall, your timeline may be reflective of some things next fall. It could actually be some things next school year. Am I right, Dr. Revis?
Exactly.
So don't think that you've got to complete. You're gonna complete the whole process, but the results of everything may not be there for you. Don't think that you've got to have results from the students at the end of this class. You probably will not have those results. Okay, Dr. Revis, you're muted.
Thank you. And we want the work that you do in this class to be beneficial to your school. But guys, that's up to your administration. They may say this is great work. I love what you've done. You did a good job leading your PLC and coming up with the research and defining what you would do. But we're just not going to do that. Well, don't let that just throw you for a loop.
Don't do that. Just remember, your goal is not to always be there. You're learning it so that when you become an administrator, that you'll be able to do this in your own school. Okay? That we're not teaching you so that you're going to be staying where you are forever. That we're helping you so that you can spread your wings and fly somewhere else and make a difference. If you can't, sometimes we can't make a difference right where we are, but we can prepare ourselves to make a difference wherever we go. Okay, Travis, I think you were trying to ask a question a while ago. Okay, is there any additional information about the add-on to Dr. Ken? Okay.
I have one more question.
Okay, hold just a second. Let me answer this for Travis, and then we'll come back. Travis, we'll talk about that on Thursday night with Dr. Lamb. So hold that question till Thursday night and make sure you ask it. Okay. Is this Angela?
Yes.
Okay, Angela.
So just for my understanding, this week when we turn in when we have to submit the peer reviews, we do not have to attach the Zoom group meeting for the test. Okay.
We'll tell you when we've got to have that. We'll tell you. I'll talk about that Thursday, and that is the Zoom links at this point have nothing to do with the individual Zooms that you're or the individual peer reviews that you're doing. That's only on your own if you choose to get with your teams right now. We don't need to see any Zoom links at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll be, and I'm thinking. Let me see. week 5. We've got 2 more weeks, so we're going to talk about it next week, and you'll actually turn that in on week 5, but I'm going to tell you exactly what you've got to do and when to do it. But thanks for asking that, Angela. Okay, other questions? I know it's getting late, but I want to make sure we've covered everything for everybody.
Dr. Stedman, I
Yes.
have a question. So I actually made a PLC with the 7th and 8th graders. Is that okay to start the data review for those 2 grades?
Say that again, Raj.
Okay, so whatever the PLC we had is the 7th and 8th grade teachers.
Uh-huh.
Can I start the data from only the 7th and 8th graders, or do I
Yes.
have to look at the whole school?
No, you just look at the 7th and 8th graders. You don't have to look at the whole school if you already know that.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question.
Now, Raj, you know, when you get into your PLC, somebody may say, well, wait a minute. Let's go back and look at 6th grade data. Okay, that may come up.
And if they do, then you, as a team, you just go back and look at it and see if it's something relevant that you need to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that's definitely going to come out because the students' progress basically depends on what they learned in the previous grades.
Well, if you know that, as the leader, you be prepared and go ahead and have the information there ready for the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, other questions? Thank you. This has been a good class. We hope that we've made things clear. I know it's long, but I'd rather it be longer, and we've got you, you know, by us not rushing, Dr. Revis, I've already seen that it's made a difference in the work that's coming in, you know, so far.
Yes. Let's end tonight, Dr. Stedman, by refreshing everybody's memory about what is due by next Sunday at 9 p.m.
You go ahead then.
Okay. So first and foremost, make sure you've done your 2 peer reviews on task 1 and that those are uploaded for your peers to review and uploaded in the assignment Dropbox so that we can review that. That you have completed and submitted your final version of your task 1 in the Dropbox. You're going to do revisions and then submit your final one in that Dropbox. That you have submitted task 2 draft in for peer and instructor review. Did I miss anything?
No, I'm going to pull up something again that I had it. Let me find it.
I think that's it.
There it is. Okay. This is found in Dr. Revis. If you'll put that under week 3 in what I sent you, you will be able to go to week 3 and you will be able to see exactly what Dr. Revis just read out. Week 2 responsibilities, and they're color coded. Exactly what she just said. That will tell you exactly what we've got to have or what's coming up Sunday night, and then, you know, what's down the road. This will help.
And I think, Dr. Stedman, that our classes are in good shape because, like I said, they had very little to have to revise on task 1, and I've already gotten almost everybody's peer reviews, at least one.
I have too. And again, if we send it back to you, your task 1, and we said to make a revision and we maybe put a 90 or 95 on there, that means you need to send it back to us with the revision so we can say, yes, you're good to go, and change that grade to 100 and move on. Okay? Okay, we'll see you on Thursday night. Good night, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.